Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia F. Scott, the creator of Freedom at the Mat, and today you're in for a treat. In today's episode, we're going to talk about pushing through and the need for psychological fortitude with the one and only reputed Dr. Rheeda Walker. Yes, she is in the house today. So, Dr. Rheeda Walker is an author. Her book is incredible. It's entitled The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. We'll talk more about that today. She's presently the professor of psychology at Wayne State University. And she has been on a mission for quite a while now, over 2 decades, to advance the emotional health of Black people and to elevate the awareness to Black people's mental health, which historically has been taboo. Today, she joins Freedom at the Mat to introduce us to a tool, a new concept that I learned about, which is called psychological fortitude. And it's going to talk about how we can reclaim the joy and reconnect to our respective purposes. You're so high. Dr. Walker, how are you today?
I'm good. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you so much. So your book is groundbreaking. And as I was reading it, I really appreciate your grounding around the fact that ancestrally, that people of color, Black people, that we have a different set of things that we've gone through and that we have pushed through for a really long time. We just push through. You mentioned, and I used to be a poet laureate and a spoken word artist. So when you talked about Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, I love that because there's this notion for Black people over the years, we're just trying to get through from day to day. Our ancestors, it's gotten better for the generations now, but over the years, it's run around, I'm just getting by, I'm 6 feet above ground, all that we do, right? So I want to talk about why you coined and introduced the concept psychological fortitude.
Well, actually, there's probably two parts to it. You know how you ask folks, well, how are you doing? And I think I might have did that with you. How are you doing? And folks
Yeah.
say, fine. But that doesn't tell you much at all, to be honest. And sometimes it's not even the truth. People just say it as a filler. And we need to move beyond, giving these sort of empty responses when it's time to truly assess how we're doing. And when we think about that, the clinical psychologist in me, as I'm always training PhD students, is that we have to meet people where they are. And so the language of mental health is something that, as you've mentioned, as we know, it doesn't go over well in our community. And so, in meeting the community where it is and recognizing the need, I needed to come up with a different label that spoke to our capacity. So, what is our true capacity to be able to take on all of our different responsibilities?
Can you break down and share your analogy that you did in the book about SPF? Because that helped me understand a little bit more about the SPF really lets you know how much sunscreen you need to apply before you get cancer. And this is kind of similar in that way. Do you mind sharing a little bit of that?
Yeah, I can definitely do that because it helps to kind of have a visual, right? And even though we don't generally like sunscreen in our community, we need it. And the thing about SPF, the sun protection factor, is that it is always labeled with a specific number or a value that tells you essentially how much protection that product is going to give you. Sometimes when you're exposed to a lot more sun, then you need a higher SPF, like you need more protection. The thing about that, and what makes it almost synonymous with PF, is that it tells us how much more we can take on. Do we need to make some different decisions? Do we need to move differently? My PF might be a 7, your PF might be a 7, but that says something totally different for the two of us, because I might need an 8 to be able to function meaningfully. You might be cooking with grease with a 7. And so everyone's number is going to be different, but it tells us whether or not we also need to re-up or reapply our sunscreen or whatever our psychological fortitude strategy is in order to be able to, in fact, accomplish things like our responsibilities at home and at work and at school. And, folks are pulled in so many different directions. We can't even track everything that we're doing most days, and to be able to manage our emotions. And so we didn't mention it yet, but the psychological fortitude is that 0 to 10 rating. 0, you got nothing in the tank, you got no protection. And 10 is as high as you can possibly imagine.
So that 0 means I'm completely wiped out. I'm distracted. I'm exhausted. I have nothing to give anybody. I'm not pushing through anything. I can start at 0 today, and maybe tomorrow I might be at 5 and I have more to give. Is that what it might mean?
That's fair, but I would actually say 0 probably speaks to crisis, like being in a place of absolute crisis. And so when someone is there, they absolutely need to, get help, like get help outside of themselves. And but I would suggest that if someone is 5 or lower, they may need to get some help, because the challenge of our day-to-day lives and why we need this kind of assessment is that it's hard to be honest about where we are, because we're so accustomed to pushing through. Like that is the name of the game, is push through no matter what. But if we can take a step back and say, what is my rating right now? Like where am I? And it's just a number, right? A number isn't judgy, isn't saying anything about you or anyone else. It's just a number. But that number says whether or not we need to take something off of our plate, like some of those responsibilities, or whether or not we need to say no to the next request, or whether or not we need to find some small, we can call it small, source of joy that allows us to be able to increase our psychological fortitude.
So, couple of questions here because I want to make it applicable for all those watching. I love the concept and just really grateful for you for coming up with it because I think I'm going to begin using it like today, right? This morning, I think I woke up with like one. Like, when I wasn't at a crisis, I'll say I was at like a 3. I was just wiped, right? How you shared that it's different for everybody. And I also loved in your book that you shared that with it being different, we can't judge one another. Some people are more low capacity, some people are more high capacity, and that doesn't even, we shouldn't judge, well, she's more high capacity. It's just like it is what it is. What triggers you, what may wipe you out, it may be very different. So how can I actually do my own rating for myself? Like, how will I know, Dr. Walker, if I'm at a 5 versus a 3 versus a 10? Do you have any guidance for us on how we can rate ourselves?
Yes, and I appreciate that question in part because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are perfectionists, and it's like I got to get the number just right. No, you do not. You got 0 and 10. So it's safe to say 5 is somewhere in the middle. And and I mentioned earlier, like 5 or lower, that could be problematic. Like a lot of folks would prefer to be somewhere closer to 7 or 8. Now, folks who are at 10 need to reach out to me and let me know what magic they have going on. But, a 7 or 8, it's been a long day. Maybe you're easily distracted. But maybe one small thing, a glass of, Riesling or whatever your preference is, a small glass of wine kind of takes the edge off and might bump you up just a little bit. But you feel like, you're kind of covering the bases. Someone who's at a 5, they're probably not covering things that are important. And so as an example, there's a deadline at work and that gets missed, and there's some health concerns, like serious health concerns that aren't being managed. And then certainly that person isn't able to manage the things that are coming at them because life keeps happening. Unexpected things happen. And so that person who's at a 5 might be thinking, if one more thing happens, if somebody else looks at me the wrong way, it's going to be on. And so those folks are definitely going to be wanting to look for strategies to raise their psychological fortitude.
See, I love this for so many reasons, and I wish that we could apply it globally. I think about so many people. I think in particular about our Black men, right? Who you may go into our neighborhoods and somebody rubs their shoulder and it's like, what? What? And it's like they're just on edge. And so they're at a point where they can't take on any more. Their life has got them to a fill and they can't take on any more. So I wish that everybody could adopt this psychological fortitude. And what I like about it is, tell me if I'm right, psychological fortitude gives us grace with ourselves. And if we adopt it in our circles with our friends and families, it can give us grace with our families. If, like you said when we were talking in advance, that your friend circle, you all ask yourself, what's your PF for the day? Am I correct?
Yeah, I might get a random text, and I say random because there was no previous conversation. I might just get a text saying, "What's your PF right now?" And I don't have to think about it. I just give a number. And this is part of being in community. And so, as an example, you were mentioning, Black men who may be on edge and don't even realize it. It becomes incumbent of the people around that person to say, "Hey, man, I noticed you were struggling a little bit. I was here reading this book, and I've had a lot of men to reach out to me, to say the book has changed their lives. But like, I've been reading this book and she's talking about this thing, the psychological fortitude, and it's a rating. It's a 0 to 10, and 0 is low. And I'm accustomed to you being, at least a 7 or 8, but you're looking like, 4 or 5. You don't have to tell me what's going on, but is that fair about a 4 or 5?" And he might say, "Yeah." And the thing about PF is that we don't have to get in people's business, because that's the other concern. Folks don't talk about how they're doing because they don't want folks in their business. And then on the other side of it, sometimes, the person who asks how you're doing, they don't want to know because they are themselves overwhelmed. But if they get a number, then what that says is this person needs help. Maybe say, "I can tell you're struggling right now. I know you've been going through X, Y, and Z, but we don't have to talk about it. Maybe tomorrow we can get together and just, get some lunch, or we can go to happy hour." Like something that shows that that person cares and that they see them and they want to provide support. We're going to need that increasingly to be in community with one another.
Couple of questions for you per that. Are there groups that have formed where people are formally adopting the PF that I can join, or any of my viewers and listeners can join? Like I can join like a book club or people who are already using this language?
That's a great question. I hear all the time about groups and various work settings among families. I was speaking with a group last week, and they mentioned that when I spoke to them a couple years ago, that person decided that they at least are going to use it to say yes and no to various things. Like that's their strategy. If this is my number, I'm saying no. And she's been doing that at work, with family, everywhere. But are there specific groups? You actually just gave me an idea, because maybe it might help for us to have some conversations about getting some groups going.
I would love that. It's like, it's community, right? That's why I'm thinking about it. Like, legitimately, I'm going to start using this. I'm going to share it with my friends. I'm going to share it with all of our followers. We're going to do a post about it, like, legitimately, because I think that as we were speaking about this whole how you doing, like this morning, even when I came in with our producer and I said, "How are you doing?" I didn't listen to what he said in response because I was just at like my low and crazy, whatever. And then I stopped and I said, "Okay, did I ask you how you were doing this morning? Did I listen?" Because I really do care, right? It's a relationship. How are you doing? But I think so many of us are so busy. Before COVID, we knew we were at an all-time level of crazy. We kind of went down, we're all chilling. Now we're kind of getting back to that space. And so we're all distracted. We have all these social media, all these responsibilities, and it's becoming too much for a lot of us again. And as you said, ancestrally, we as people of color, we as Black people, what we know how to do is push through. That's what we know how to do first. We don't know how to actually reach out for help and talk to our therapist. So I would love to support you as you develop those groups, and then we can share that with our followers as well. Just a couple more questions. I know you're a very busy lady, and I appreciate your time this morning. Can you talk to us about the connection between PF and purpose? Because when we were talking, what you were sharing with me is that PF was really designed and coined because you wanted to help Black people get back to their purposes and their joy. So can you talk about that?
Ooh, there's so much need in our community, but I am certain that we can meet those needs if more of us were tapped into our purpose. Like there is so much brilliance and creativity and, dare I say, magic and joy
Yep.
for Black girls and Black boys. There is so much, but it gets weighed down with all the stuff that's happening. And so, to the degree that we can collectively max out our psychological fortitude, we can begin to address things like the poverty in our community, the homelessness, the unhoused in our community,
Mhm.
the folks who are working in spaces where they feel like their gifts and talents aren't being used because they haven't even been seen because they're invisible. Like we have what we need, but we can't tap into it because folks are so overwhelmed and operating outside of their purpose. And understandably so, like, because a lot of us are really just trying to make it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
But when we can get to that higher place where we're doing the thing that we were put on this planet to do, and every single one of us has a thing that we were put here to do,
Yes.
then we'll be able to see more uplifting in our collective community of Black folks.
Got it. Okay, last couple of questions. So I want to talk about how we can be better loved ones. If someone asks you how you're doing and someone responds, "Is there anything you need?" Can we talk about how that really does shift the responsibility onto us? What are some more alternatives that people can offer when someone says, "Well, if there's anything you need," like when someone's died or someone's, going through like a divorce, "Well, if there's anything you need, let me know." That's not really helpful because that's actually making me do more. What are some alternatives that people can say when someone says, "There's anything I can need," or more importantly, "My PF is at a 5." Now, I know what I heard you say a little bit ago of like, okay, we don't have to talk about it today, we can talk about it tomorrow. But what else can we as loved ones offer to our friends who are suffering and our loved ones who are suffering?
We can be practical. Sometimes I think we imagine these sort of extravagant, I don't know what folks think, these extravagant needs that folks have, or that individuals will, like you said, from their very overwhelmed place, come up with one, come up with what they need, and two, reach out and ask when people don't like to ask for help because they don't want to burden someone else. But we know everybody needs to eat, right? So a practical thing might be sending a DoorDash gift card, or making something. Ooh, some home cooked food. Imagine that. I don't know if folks are still cooking at the house, but some home cooked food, because it is a basic thing that everybody needs. But you know how it is trying to figure out, what are we going to eat today? Like, just removing something that's a responsibility. The what's on the other side of that, though, is that person feeling like someone sees them and someone cares, rather than feeling isolated. A lot of the research that I do is related to mental health crisis. And the thing is, when people are in crisis, they can't think, they can't plan. It's hard to figure out what the next step is. And so providing just basic needs, sometimes a basic need is like paper plates and toilet paper and paper towels, like basic kinds of things that people can always use. And then also just some time to listen and saying, you don't have to tell me all the details, but I'm just here to listen. If you want to just tell me the thing that is most upsetting about, fill in the blank, like whatever it may be, what's most upsetting, that actually allows people to be able to zero in on their struggle rather than being overwhelmed with all of the details. And that's something that, when I'm working with PhD students, that I will, when their client starts to talk about like just like all the things that they're overwhelmed by, try to zero in on the most disturbing or upsetting thing. And that allows that person to be able to focus and actually to feel a little bit less overwhelmed.
I love that because I think a lot of times we get into like, well, this happened, and then my mama did this, and then my daddy did this, and my little girl did this, and a teacher at the school. It gets into everything. But when you say, okay, what's the one thing that's just stressing you the most, that can kind of help you really get out the biggest thing that's pressuring you. All right, so Dr. Rheeda, I know that this psychological fortitude was born from a place of supporting people of color, Black people, but is it solely for Black people?
That's a very perceptive question, because the unapologetic guy for a Black mental health is unapologetic for a reason. At the same time, it's been helping a lot of people. And I hear from people from a lot of different backgrounds who will say, I know you didn't write this book for me, but this has been helpful for me in my life. And I can appreciate that because it allows me to stay in my purpose lane, while, yes, obviously helping anyone who might be in need. Because we as a greater society need to be able to communicate our needs more effectively, to one another, and also to be able to get those needs met rather than trying to, flounder and hope for the best. Hope is a good thing, but it's not a strategy. So I'm glad that it is, in fact, helpful for a lot of people.
Very well. Dr. Rheeda Walker, we so much appreciate your time today. I invite everyone, we're going to show it on the screen. We invite everyone to definitely get a copy and read it thoroughly. There's also a workbook accompaniment to it as well. The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by Dr. Rheeda Walker. We appreciate your time today. And we also hope that everyone will begin to adopt the concept of psychological fortitude. It's helping you set boundaries, helping you establish where you are every single day and not continuing to push through when you no longer have the capacity to do so. May God be with you all. Ashe.